What's going on?
We're looking for a boy and a girl. The girl has killed several soldiers. She's armed and dangerous. By order of Count Victor of Arles. We're searching this camp.
I know a guilty look when I see one. But whatever you've done, I won't give up a child.
As this video comes out, we're 5 days away from the release of A Plague Tale Requiem. Before then, you should try out its predecessor, A Plague Tale Innocence, especially if you're a fan of The Last of Us, as subscribers to my channel tend to be. A Plague Tale Innocence is an easy game to miss. A year after release, the developers announced that they'd sold 1 million copies of the game, a huge achievement for an indie studio with 250 employees, but there will still be a huge number of gamers who have never heard of it, let alone played it. If that's you, then hopefully this video will convince you to at least give it a shot. Like The Last of Us, A Plague Tale Innocence is a heavily story-driven game centered around the playable protagonist escorting a vulnerable younger character in the midst of an outbreak, which they may be the key to ending, and using stealth to evade both human and monstrous enemies. However, beyond this superficial similarity, the stories differ considerably. Whilst the game wears its influences on its sleeve, the developers having cited both The Last of Us and Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, it still very much has its own identity. Innocence is set in France in 1348. The 100 Years' War with England has at that point been raging only for 11 years, and the Black Death is at its height. Our protagonist is Amicia de Rune, the 15-year-old daughter of Lord Robert de Rune. Their brother Hugo is just 5, and she hardly knows him because he spent his life shut in and cared for by his mother due to a mysterious illness. When Amicia is out hunting with her father, their hunting dog Leon is mysteriously and gruesomely eaten alive by something unseen. Shortly after this horror, the Inquisition arrive at the de Rune estate in search of Hugo. Amicia sees her father killed before her mother helps her and Hugo escape and seemingly is murdered herself. Amicia must then escape the estate in search of a doctor called Laurentius, who can help them. On the way, they must get past both human enemies who want to kill them and swarms of rats who not only carry the plague, but are eating people alive and are repelled only by light. They also gain allies in the form of other orphans and outcasts who all end up banding together to face the rats and the Inquisition. Amicia is a teenage girl rather than a hardened survivor like Joel, and so stealth and solving basic traversal puzzles are the name of the game in getting past these threats. As the game progresses, both access to new ammunition and weapon upgrades increase your range of options, but fundamentally every enemy has you at a disadvantage. With the rats, the player must deduce the best ways to keep them occupied or repel them, using or lighting fires, shooting down corpses for them to feed on with Amicia's catapult, and in one particularly gruesome scene, luring a live pig to meet its doom.
Yes, dinner time, piggy. Yum yum.
The humans need to be avoided by stealth at first, either by using environmental obstacles or by throwing things to distract them, or both. As the game progresses, Amicia can use the sling and various alchemical compounds to kill the enemies or distract them, and this too plays into the puzzle of how to get past each area. A simple rock to the head will kill some enemies, others wear armor and so must be avoided, unless you have a way to trick them into removing it. You can also use rats against the humans by knocking out the lights soldiers carry and letting them get eaten alive. However, this still requires stealthy, evasive gameplay, as soldiers can easily overpower you when you get close, or sometimes kill you from a distance with projectiles. The stealth system in this game is incredibly simplistic, but intentionally so. One of the mechanics built in is that Hugo, being a child, will easily panic and attract enemies if you stray too far from him. This simply doesn't lend itself to Metal Gear Solid type antics. The levels are designed to provoke the player to think about the route forward and use the tools available to open it up, whilst not straying too far from your vulnerable cargo. Whilst this could easily be annoying with the wrong balance, for the most part it works. The only time the stealth really threatens to break your immersion is where you play as Hugo. These are very straightforward and scripted to allow progression. However, there are moments where on a first playthrough it might not be immediately apparent which way to go, or you miss a cue by a few seconds and you get spotted and have to restart as a result. This isn't the most egregious thing in the world, but much like the Mary Jane stealth sequences in Spider-Man, they aren't what you're playing the game for and do somewhat overstay their welcome. Whilst Amicia isn't Joel but still very much holds her own in a different way, Hugo definitely isn't Ellie. The scripted chase or action sequences can go the opposite way. While the auto-aim on Amicia's sling is definitely a necessary way to minimise frustration, it doesn't work as well as it should on moving targets, especially if they're moving up or down slopes and stairs. Combining this with the fact that if the kill animation from a slingshot and the death animation from an enemy reaching you occur at the same time, the enemy killing you always takes priority, and some sequences become an exercise in persistence through gritted teeth. This is perhaps compounded by the checkpoint usually being before several beats of in-game dialogue that, unlike the proper cutscenes, you can't skip. The same issue of giving priority to enemies killing you over you killing them causes frustrations elsewhere. Later in the game, you unlock a way to target rats against enemies, and will still have to deal with enemies knocking you dead even with rats under their feet because they reached you a split second before the rats reached them. Despite these annoyances, the game overall is fun to play through. It does hold your hand quite firmly at the start, before finally ramping up the challenge of each area in line with the new tools available, but the story is strong enough to carry this. Likewise, whilst even later on the challenge isn't the most taxing in the world, the immersion of the environment sells it enough to make it fun to progress through. As the story progresses, you'll also gain allies who can serve useful functions for you, such as lockpicking or more forceful stealth kills. This makes later encounters more sandbox-like than earlier ones, as you get some freedom in choosing the best way to progress. The story is solidly written and compellingly told. The relationship between Amicia and Hugo is believable enough that you can feel their fear, their loss, Hugo's confusion at the strange and hostile world he's been flung into, and Amicia's frustration at him acting exactly like an innocent child who doesn't understand what's going on around him. The fact that the protagonist and supporting cast are all children, orphaned and coming to terms with the hostility of the world in varying ways, grounds Innocence as not only the title of the game, but also a major theme of its story. Whilst most explicit with Hugo, all of the kids are grappling with the loss of innocence after being thrust into a world that has no place for them. We can also see this in the distinct personalities and characteristics of Amicia's group aligning with the archetypes often seen in children's adventures, except here the adults aren't bumbling or clueless, but actively dangerous and hostile. Think Enid Blyton's famous 5 if they had to kill to survive. Oddly, this actually makes the story more optimistic than The Last of Us ever was. Both have their darkness, low moments and death, and both have levity that breaks up that tension. But where Joel was broken and put up walls that Ellie had to tear down, Amicia and the others still grasp tightly to hope, friendship, and simply being children, even in a world which has stripped everything from them. The difference in outlook is even more apparent if you play through to the ending. The story is able to convey its themes so effectively, and to deliver moments of joyous levity and bleak horror alike for 3 reasons. How the game looks is one, as the emotion the character models convey and the immersion of the environments is incredible for an indie studio. Another is the acting, with child actors doing an outstanding job with the main characters, conveying a huge amount of authenticity even when the dialogue is clunky, perhaps a result of the writer's first language being French rather than English. And third, at least as important as the rest, is the soundtrack. The music feels medieval, as perhaps you should expect, but as part of that, the instruments used do well to convey tension, drama, despair and joy alike. If you've not experienced the game, you definitely should, especially if you've seen enough of the sequel to tempt you into playing it. A Plague Tale Requiem looks to both build upon the existing game mechanics and expand the systems, for example by making Amicia a more confident and competent killer, and by having Hugo be a bit more grown up than he was before. I'll be playing it live on the channel from the day it releases, so be sure to check that out, and once I'm done, I'll put up a review as well. I want to know what you think. If you've played A Plague Tale Innocence, are you looking forward to Requiem? If you haven't, will you be picking it up? Leave a comment and let me know. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like and consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content, like the video that just popped up, which YouTube thinks you should watch next. Check out the links in the description to join my Patreon for as little as £1 per month, or donate to my GoFundMe and get your name in the credits of my videos, like those rolling up now, who I want to thank for supporting me and my content. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.
Belly!